Hello again, guys. Setch here, and I'm back for, I guess this is episode 8 in my little YouTube series. And this is a video that I hadn't really planned to make. It came about as a response to a post that I saw in the War Thunder users forums. And it's a post where a fellow is complaining about air domination mode, and he says, "I hate air domination, and I'll explain why. First, you must understand that I'm not a Twitch player with reflexes like a stabbed rat, and thus I'm no good at fighters." And then he continues on to describe his experiences in air domination, where he spawns into a match that's already underway. He proceeds to get sniped again and again at the spawn point. Now, I totally respect anybody who says that just as a matter of personal preference, they are interested in flying bombers and not interested in flying fighters. I get that. But in this case, the reason that the fellow gives, that it requires Twitch reflexes to fly fighters, is just not true. My friend Longshot already replied to the thread and pointed out that that's just not true. It doesn't necessarily require Twitch reaction times to succeed with fighters. But I wanted to provide some illustrations, and also start out by saying I think the complaint is sort of self-refuting. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I'm not trying to demean the person making the complaint, but just bear with me. The complaint describes an experience of being repeatedly caught by surprise and shot down before the person has a chance to react. And the conclusion is that fighters require Twitch reaction times. But think about the experience that you've described as a target, and imagine that target is some other player. Does it really sound like it requires Twitch reaction times to attack that target? Not really. All it requires is being in the right place at the right time, and that's not something that requires Twitch reaction time. It just requires a good sense and understanding of how the fight is unfolding. So, even if you don't have Twitch reaction times, you can still be on the other side of this script and be the attacker rather than the target. Having a good reaction time can certainly help, and there's an expert online named Flip who sometimes posts videos of outrageous skill shots, and those are very fun to watch. But the purpose of this video is sort of the opposite, to show that flying a fighter can be a very deliberate process that doesn't necessarily need to require fast reactions at all. It does require alertness, and you can see in the video that I'm constantly looking around. I'm looking around more than I'm flying the plane. And so my first bit of advice here is that you do need to have good camera control. And the first element of that is to have a good keybind for your camera. I've got mine on the right mouse button, so it's very easy for me to move the camera a lot. Second, it's not just a question of seeing the situation, but also understanding what it means. Knowing which planes are the most dangerous, being able to ascertain which ones are in the most threatening positions, which players are aware of you and which ones are not, and being able to identify and prioritize threats. Fighter pilots refer to it as situational awareness, and good situational awareness requires developing an intuitive understanding of how the world works. In a game, that means understanding the simulation and how the players are likely to behave. And gamers sometimes refer to it as game sense. Anyway, it's not magic, and there's no one easy step. It requires practice. Being able to read the state of the board is the first step, but on top of that, you'll also need to understand how to fight in a way that is strategic, or at least tactical, and doesn't rely on fast reflexes to save the day. The type of fighting in air combat that achieves that goal is called energy fighting. So you'll need some familiarity with energy management, and that also requires practice, and I would suggest searching for energy fighting online. There's a lot of resources that will go into more detail than I can go here. This is just an overview. Anyway, with those advantages, you can put yourself in a position where the attack itself doesn't require good reflexes to execute. The outcome of an attack against an air target depends on the balance of 4 factors: the alertness and maneuverability of the target versus your position and firepower. So you can see it's an asymmetrical balance. The strengths that matter for you as the attacker are not the same as the strengths that matter for the target. If the target sees your approach, then they'll maneuver to avoid it if they can. And if they're able to maneuver at the time, then that'll cause problems for you and make your attack more difficult. You can see how the maneuverability and alertness of the target matters, but your position also matters because it'll affect how hard it is for the target to detect your approach, and also how hard it is for them to maneuver against you. And lastly, if your guns are weak, then the target may survive the initial attack and have a chance to react, even if you catch them off guard. That's when gameplay becomes twitch, when you've blown the element of surprise, you've blown your positional advantage, the target is actively fighting against you and maneuvering to evade attacks. But it doesn't always have to come to that, and the question here is, what can you do on your end to help end the fight before it gets to that stage? Well, the easiest factor of this problem to solve is your own firepower, because at least in War Thunder, you have the choice of which aircraft are going to fly out and which ammunition you're going to load in the guns. So the first step is to pick an aircraft with adequate firepower, and the objective should be to do lethal damage in less time than the average reaction of the target. It's hard to do that at reserve tier because the guns are so weak down there, which is why reserve tier is relatively twitch. But in the rest of the game, you have plenty of options available. I would recommend looking for at least one cannon, one 20mm cannon in the mix, and personally, I like stealth ammo a lot because it gives me extra time before the target reacts. So it operates on the balance there between your firepower and the target's alertness. And that can often make the difference between a clean ambush versus a protracted duel. Next up, let's talk about your position. You want to pick fights where you have an advantage. Ideally, that means being above the target, faster than the target, and behind the target. Speed is everything in air combat because that gives you control of the engagement. It allows you to fight when the odds are in your favor and leave when they're not. If you're in the faster aircraft, then the target can chase you, but they can't catch you. But speed in air combat depends on a variety of factors, not just the nominal top speed of your plane, but also how you're flying it. And altitude is valuable too because it can be exchanged for speed. Fighter pilots say speed is life, and altitude is life insurance. In game, you want to pick an aircraft that is fast, and ideally also something that can climb well, which means it'll be easier for you to get into a good initial position above the other aircraft on the field. Being behind the target is not necessarily required. In fact, it's sort of overemphasized in the media, in films of air combat. Really, a full profile deflection shot from above the target is greatly preferable to chasing and shooting at them from behind. But also consider whether your position makes it easy for the target to keep track of you and see you. The way I'm looking around constantly, most players are not doing that. They're looking ahead in a 60-degree cone, and as long as you approach from outside of that cone, you're effectively invisible. So that's a big advantage to not necessarily being behind the target, but at least approaching from a position that is outside of that cone. What about the alertness of the target? Well, that's obviously not something that you can control directly, but if you have control of the engagement, then you can pick which target you're going to fight, and you can look for targets that are not alert. Ideally, you would look for targets that are fixated on something else. This works great when you're working with a wingman. You can see several examples in the video where the hostile aircraft are chasing after my teammates or my squad mates, often shooting ineffectually from long range, and I'm able to fly right up and casually blast them with a full broadside, point blank. Now, you can potentially do this to any target that is fixated, and that can often develop as an accident of circumstance, that they're just climbing towards a friendly bomber is a situation you'll see often. But it's also a situation that you can manufacture deliberately. This is called drag and bag. People sometimes refer to prostitution as the oldest profession, that it's just, it's part of human nature, it's always been there. Drag and bag is sort of the same way. I think of it as the oldest maneuver. It really has nothing at all to do with the properties of the aircraft and everything to do with the psychology and limitations of the pilots. It applies the same from biplanes to jet fighters, and it's pretty much always effective. And it can lead to a very easy attack for the person on the attacking end. Lastly, what about the maneuverability of the target? Well, if you can catch the target off guard and shoot them down before they can react, then that factor is eliminated entirely, which is why it is valuable to have an aircraft that has good armament, and also, again, why I recommended stealth ammo. But even if you can't catch the target off guard, you may still be able to lure them into a situation where they're too slow to maneuver. There are a few examples of that in this video, and it's that type of fighting is a subset of energy fighting, and again, I would recommend searching for that online. That's it for this video, and I hope that it's been informative, or at least fun to watch. As to the game, War Thunder has a variety of different roles, different types of gameplay, and I encourage everybody to find their own niche and get enjoyment out of the game. And I certainly don't mean to suggest that people should fly fighters instead of bombers because fighters are better or something. But I hope that I have at least illustrated that there can be more to fighter gameplay than just twitch target tracking. With that said, good hunting, guys. Setch out.